Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to This Week in Mythic Plus. This week's affixes are Tyrannical, Bolstering, and Necrotic, of course, as well as Prideful. It's one of the worst combinations of affixes for many players. All three of these affixes can be extremely difficult. Bolstering alone makes a lot of trash pulls really complicated. And there's not really too many options this expansion for doing like fancy different pathing to play around bolstering. For the most part, it's just you got to do the same pulls, but you got to prioritize your damage really well. And then Necrotic and Tyrannical are a really tough combination of affixes, right? There's a lot of bosses that are hard already on Tyrannical, but any boss that is difficult for your tank at all, when Necrotic is involved as well, things get much harder for them. So this week is one where, depending on what level keys you're trying to do, depending on how geared your tank is relative to the rest of your group, if your tank is over geared relative to the rest of your group, then it can be fine. But if the tank is one of the less geared players in your group, or one of the less familiar, experienced players with this group, really all three of the affixes can be managed by the tank. Although, as much damage as possible for Tyrannical, making sure you have prides into bosses are going to be the big ways of going about this. Now, in addition to this, we do have a slight change to just one of the dungeons, actually. Sanguine Depths. We have nerfs to some of the abilities in here. So Dark Acolytes, Dark Bolt, getting a slight cast time nerf. Chamber Sentinels, that's the big gargoyles. Craggy Fracture. Damage is being reduced. It's cast less frequently. And it now targets fewer players as well, so it's not going to target every single player. That will help out, particularly the one that you fight at the end of the General Call, Trash Gauntlet. You can sometimes lose the entire space of the AoE circle, which is also getting buffed. The AoE circle is now going to remove all bleed effects, which should include Necrotic as well, because Necrotic is a bleed effect, although as of the time of recording this, don't know for sure. But it does include Severing Slice and Grievous. So this will help out with the healer mana situation on that Trash Gauntlet, but it'll still be a very tough spot to be, and Necrotic is still a very tough affix in that area. A couple bugs fixed as well, including the double cast bug on Grand Proctor, and some slight reduction in the dot damage if you get hit on General Call. This is a set of changes that will help definitely a lot of groups out in this dungeon, makes a lot of things a little bit easier. I wouldn't say it addresses all of the big reasons that this dungeon is one of the harder ones, but certainly there will be some changes that you feel in here. This line here, the Sinfall Boon buff, increased from killing non-combat creatures, this was a bug that briefly was discovered where you could use toys to spawn ads that died. Like, there's a little toy that threw 5 spiders onto the ground that died in a short time after, and they would give you the buff from the Venthyr lanterns, so they fixed that bug, obviously. Fun detected. No surprise there. And they fixed one of the issues where a spear in Spire of Ascension failed to register a hit when it looked like it should. Although, they might have just typed this. I feel like people just say this when they miss so that they get yelled at less. But yeah, that's maybe if that actually has happened to you, it'll be less likely to. So, that's what's happening in the dungeons this week. As always, we're more than 12 weeks into the patch, so we've already seen this set of affixes before. I've already made a video going more in-depth dungeon by dungeon, so I'm not going to talk about every single dungeon this week. If you want to see me talk about every dungeon, there is a video from 12 weeks ago that you can go check out for that. I want to instead just highlight some specifics, especially things that I've learned since then that might help you out in your dungeons this week. If you're interested in any of my routes, I have made some updates to basically all of the dungeons this week. They're available on Raider.io. You can check the description below. You can get a link to find them. So the main thing I want to talk about this week is which of the bosses are the hardest Tyrannical Necrotic ones. There's a big concentration of them actually in Theater Pain. We got Gorechop, actually, and Zav, and Mordretha can all be in there, and Necrotic is actually one of the toughest. This is a boss fight here, the Affront of Challengers, that is one of the easiest boss fights in most cases, but with Necrotic active, it can be really difficult for your tank to find a reset. So Theater is a dungeon that's always tough, but this week I would say is especially tough for that reason. If we talk a little bit about Spires instead, Spires is a little bit of the opposite situation, where the trash packs can be pretty tough, especially with bolstering active, there's a lot of natural bolstering awkwardness with differently sized health enemies you want to focus and kill first. But the bosses themselves, every single boss in this dungeon has an opportunity for your tank to drop stacks of necrotic. So in terms of the tyrannical necrotic front, it's actually a better Spires week, I'd say, than usual. And then in terms of other things you're going to want to watch out for, Mists, make absolutely sure that you have as much damage as humanly possible for the Ingramalic burn phase. And make sure that it doesn't cast a fear directly before the burn phase as well, because you will stay feared as you go into that burn phase. That's really something you want to try and avoid. So you can wait to push until after the first fear, or beat the fear, but don't split the difference and end up, losing your burn phase. If you're doing this key, really at any level where the dungeon isn't at trivial difficulty, be ready for multiple phases, but you still need to save damage for the burn, because you still want to get through that quickly. You'll also need to use cooldowns, though, on the tree as they come up, basically, afterwards, to make sure that you don't spend too long in the Embrace Darkness phases. And yeah, other than that, Halls of Atonement, watch out for bears. Bears are every week bad. Bears this week in particular. Your tank is already under a lot of pressure from necrotic. Those shouldn't keep hitting your tank, probably in most pulls, unless you're, again, trivializing the dungeon. AoE stuns on Echelon, you got to be careful if you AoE silence the adds, that they don't add a bunch of stacks to your tank. So if you are going to AoE crowd control these guys, throw a stun on them as well, or your tank can stand far away from them, you can slow them or whatever, but don't let your tank get to 300 stacks on that boss fight. If they do it, they can usually get a reset when the boss is channeling into the leap, but not always, so you got to be careful of that. DOS, it's really Tyrannical that is most operative in here, I'd say. Tyrannical Necrotic, Hakar is one that will be tough, and actually the Mana Storms in particular with Necrotic adds a lot of threat, so really, really try and make sure you have cooldowns for those. Anything you can do to relieve some pressure on your tank, especially during Maleficent. Tank's going to be under a lot of attack. Kyrian Files this week, remember those clear Necrotic, really, really, really valuable if you're a tank player and you're a Kyrian to use those things. They're so good, so make sure you're getting value out of them. Of course, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that if you are a Kyrian tank, but Necrotic is a bleed. It's a physical dot. Every single physical dot in World of Warcraft is a bleed and will be removed by File unless it's explicitly coded to not be removable. Okay, which there are some effects like that. Anyways, last thing I wanted to mention, Plaguefall. Slimes bolster, so don't pull 20 of these if you can't kill them all at the same time, or deal with some that have 15 bolstering stacks, which you probably can't, so be very careful of that. This is a danger room this week, and every On Death Affix week, but it doesn't look like it should be, because they have so little health, so be ready for that. Anyways, that's a quick look at the different dungeons this week. Hopefully that prepares you for keys this week. If, on the other hand, you've decided this week is not for keys, I don't blame you. It's a very tough week. Don't feel discouraged if timers are feeling worse than they did last week. It is one of the hardest weeks on the calendar. So that's that. Have fun out there in keys. Check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Dratnos. Check out, if you're interested, I've made some 9.1 videos. I made just a quick series of first reactions to some of the different 9.1 informations, not in depth. I will make some in-depth ones as we go further into the PTR cycle. But you can check those out if you're interested. They're on my channel as well. Just 6 little shorter videos about that. I guess they're not that short. They're 10 to 20 minutes. Anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Hit subscribe and stuff. Thanks everyone for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.